Start your show now, press 1. To hear important instructions, press 2.
Your show is scheduled to start in 17 seconds. Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. Welcome to another edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on Blog Talk Radio and YouTube via Zoom. I'm your host, Leon Jones. I'm doing my live broadcast from the city of the Purdue Boilermakers, Lafayette, Indiana, home to the Boilermakers. And I hope everybody is enjoying their Saturday. Weekends do go fast. But there's an issue about race that's surrounding everybody. And the schools want to implement it. In today's video, Blog Talk Radio show, I'm going to talk about that. And I'm going to get into how the education system is flawed. A number of us out here brag about our college degrees, but I'm going to tell you something. College degree doesn't mean anything unless you know how to utilize it. A college degree is only as good as the person who received it. Because in the long run, a college degree is a minimum to get the job. Now, some might be asking, well, why am I talking about college degrees? Well, this CRT, known as critical race theory, revolves around academics. And you have individuals out there like Dr. Boyce Watkins and Mark Lamont Hill and Michael Eric Dyson and Cornel West. They have all of the degrees, but their degrees weren't in anything that actually builds infrastructure. Their degrees were basically theoretical. Now, I'm not saying that these individuals are not intelligent, but when you claim that you are about economics, practice your craft. I'm a civil engineer. Now, the only thing that actually stands between me and becoming a better civil engineer is to get the credential known as the PE, and I'm working on that. However, my education that I use helps me deal with everyday folk. I live in the real world. Now, with all that being said, I want you all to like the video. It's very important that you like the videos. Support my channel. Hit the Cash App at the bottom of my videos if you want. I'm not going to beg for money, but it would be nice if you support my channel. A number of you brothers can go out there and support these women's channels. You can't support another brother. And, another thing that brothers need to stop doing before I go on as well, need to stop being jealous of one another because everybody has a different talent. Yes, there are people here on YouTube that bring you nothing but bullshit every day. It's drama. I see it. And brothers need to stop arguing with the women. I don't even take them seriously. I don't even go to their nonsense because that's what it is. It's all nonsense. And in the long run, you're not going to be able to get to them with the philosophy. So if you're red pill, don't let anybody tell you anything different. if you're MGTOW, whatever you describe yourself as, there's a reason why you became part of that acronym or the philosophy. It's because of experiences. And here in society, believe it or not, when it comes to men, men are still being objectified. They're not being respected. And in the long run, it's not going to help men. And men need to, again, stop fighting each other, especially Black men. Men also need to embrace masculinity. It's not toxic. And masculinity goes much further than sex. The problem with Black men is they have sex on their mind too much. Yes, I like making love just like everybody else does. Love women just like a number of heterosexual men love women. However, women cannot be put at the top of the pedestal for you brothers. Having an economy. Now there are brothers out there, and I like to shout them out. Shout out to brother Little Big Nate. I go to his show. Shout out to Sir Tice, Clue, Osama Abdul, Brother Trey, Theo Wharf, Chaos Rain, Brother Melly Mel, Brother TPOT. Get to his channel, the Prophet of Thought series. You want some serious debates? He has it locked in. And I will also shout out Brother Bernard Riley. Now, I shouted out those brothers because those are mature brothers. And one thing I notice about YouTube, you have to find an area that you fit in. And those brothers are a little bit more mature, and their content is worth listening to. Shout out to Brother Red Supreme as well if you want to go to information about the game. He gives you the raw about what's going on in the streets with women. Shout out to Minister Jap. Each one or each brother has to go into an area where there are like-minded men. We don't do that. So also, what I'm going to do with part of this video is freestyle a little bit while I talk about critical race theory. Now, here's what you need to do to reach me. You can check me out on the 401 Talk Zone radio show on YouTube. Now, of course, today's broadcast is going to be on YouTube and Blog Talk Radio. The guest calling number is 215-383-5785 if you want to call in. Also, you can check out the Mind of STEM channel. That channel, I give you information on subjects and careers within the STEM majors like engineering. And under engineering, there's mechanical engineering, civil engineering, electrical engineering, chemical engineering. Then I talk about technology, information technology, cybersecurity, computer science, computer information systems. Then I also talk about science. Of course, there's physics, chemistry, and biology. And then I get into mathematics. Talk about algebra, calculus, and trigonometry. Now, if you cannot find me on YouTube or Blog Talk Radio, you can check me out on Twitter, MeWe, and Parler. Don't ask me about Facebook. I stopped doing Facebook a long time ago. I call it Fascist Book. Facebook is dead. In my, excuse me, had to cough. But again, you can find me on Twitter, MeWe, and Parler. Again, Facebook is dead. So, with all that being said, I'm going to get into the topic of critical race theory. Shout out to Brother Ramil. He's already gone into it as well. And because he's going into it as well, I'm just going to do a little piggyback off of what he said. Now, for shits and giggles here, I'm going to go off Wikipedia. I do not like utilizing Wikipedia, but it's a sure way to get to the topic. Now, sit by as I share my screen here. All right. So we talk about critical race theory. Now, if you look up in the right-hand corner, I can tell you who's already part of it, mainly Black academics. And I believe critical race theory started in the city of Chicago. Now, as we talk about critical race theory is a body of legal scholarship and an academic movement of civil rights scholars and activists in the United States that seeks to critically examine U.S. law as it intersects with issues of race in the United States. So to challenge mainstream American liberal approaches to racial justice. Now, when I hear anybody talk about liberal justice, I'm already bing, 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 thinking of Marxism. Because CRT examines social, cultural, and legal issues as they relate to race and racism in the United States. Or are they saying that all white people are bad? Well, CRT, or critical race theory, has been around since the 30s, but a lot of us didn't know about it. Now, for the most part, according to Wikipedia, this information is saying that CRT originated in the mid-1970s in the writings of several American legal scholars, including Derek Bell, Alan Freeman, Kimberly Crenshaw, Richard Delgado, Cheryl Harris, Charles R. Lawrence III, Marie Masuda, and Patricia J. Williams. It emerged as a movement by the 1980s, reworking theories of critical legal studies, known as CLS. And CLS, again, focuses more on race. Now, of course, CRT is grounded in critical theory, and it draws from thinkers such as Antonio Gramsci, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, and W.E.B. Du Bois, as well as the Black Power Chicano and radical feminist movements from the 1960s and 1970s. Just pause for a moment. Radical feminist movements. That'll tell you a lot because a number of these academics are women. Now, when it comes to critical race theories, they don't all share the same beliefs. But you don't have to share the same beliefs to have the same basic foundation, because the basic tenets of CRT include that racism and desperate racial outcomes are the result of complex changing and often subtle social institutional dynamics rather than explicit and international prejudices on the part of individuals. You see, CRT scholars also view race and white supremacy as an intersectional social construction. Now, When we talk about social constructionism, we're basically dealing with a theory of knowledge in sociology and communication theory that examines the development of jointly constructed understandings of the world that form the basis for shared assumptions about reality. Now, again, when it comes to social constructionism, the theory centers on the notion that the meanings are developed in coordination with others rather than separately within each individual. Now, when we deal with critical race theory and we talk about the intersectional social construction, what does that really mean? Well, it means it serves the interest of white people against those of marginalized communities at large in the field of legal studies. See, CRT emphasizes that merely making laws colorblind on paper may not be enough to make the application of the laws colorblind. Ostensibly, colorblind laws can be applied in racially discriminatory ways. Now, a key concept of CRT, again, is intersectionality. Again, intersectionality is an analytical framework for understanding how aspects of a person's social and political identities continue to create different modes of discrimination and privilege. Now, the term was conjured by one Kimberly Williams Crenshaw back in 1989 or 1969. Let me put my glasses on just to find out so I give you the right date. Eyes go bad. 1989. Again, want you all to like the video. If you disagree, you could dislike it. It's not going to hurt my feelings, but I'm just giving you my insight on how we are using racism to tear down the country. And see, the divide and conquer culture is heavily involved in Marxism, but a number of individuals don't see that. Again, when we deal with academics, people who are also involved in this movement, the LGBTQ, you had academics like Cloward Pivens. Now, it might not be a heavily involvement, but it is an involvement. Now, again, this connects to education. This is why I believe the individuals who are scholars, and scholars are your PhDs. I'm not real impressed by PhD because I believe a number of PhDs are, for the most part, they base everything in theory. Now, again, let's get back on track here. Academic critics of CRT argue that it relies on, I just told you before, social constructivism or social constructionism, and it elevates storytelling over evidence and reason, and it rejects the concepts of truth and merit and opposes liberalism. Now, for me, when it comes to critical race theory, I do not believe that it opposes liberalism. It's the proponent of liberalism. Because one thing I can tell you about liberals in this country, they're all about emotion and fantasy about how the world should be, but they don't understand the real world. And this is the difference between red pill and blue pill, because basically when we deal with blue pill, it rejects the concepts of truth and merit. Red pill accepts the truth. And again, red pill goes much further than women. Now, since 2020, conservative lawmakers in the United States have sought to ban or restrict critical race theory instruction along with other anti-racism programs. Now, critics of these efforts say the lawmakers have poorly defined or misrepresented the tenets and importance of CRT, and that the goal of the laws is to silence broader discussions of racism, equality, social justice, and history of race. Now, again, when we go back into the definition, Roy L. Brooks defined social justice, critical race theory, which is intertwined into social justice. Mr. Brooks defined CRT in 1994 as a collection of critical stances against the existing legal order from a race-based point of view. Richard Delgado, a co-founder of the theory, defined it in 2017 as a collection of activists and scholars interested in studying and transforming the relationship among race, racism, and power. Now, again, one must understand that racism is the belief that groups of humans possess different behavioral traits corresponding to the physical appearance and can be divided based on superiority of one race over another. And that means when it comes to true racism, the group that believes that they're superior want to basically object, or they want to disqualify, or they basically want to put down groups when it comes to the market of economics, politics, and social ability. That's truly what racism is. Now, what we call racism, in a sense, is prejudice, because when you have different cultures, you're going to have different points of view. And we have cultures coming over here, and they're bringing we have citizens or other ethnic groups coming over here, and they're bringing their cultures here. Now, when it comes to black people have to understand that they weren't the only ones who were slaves either. Everyone has had slaves. White people were indentured servants. And I think with African Americans, critical race theory basically points at us because we are the most emotional when it comes to race. Yes, what happened to African Americans is purely ignorant, but whatever happened to the Jews and the Holocaust? They came back. But it seems to me that the Democratic Party wants to keep African Americans on the plantation, and they're African Americans in the Gen X and the baby boomer generation who still believe in the philosophy of Marxism and plantation politics by the Democratic Party. Now, again, when it comes to education, I believe that the education system in this country is corrupt. I've always believed that it's corrupt. To me, too many of us go to school, we're indoctrinated by what the professor says. Now, what you need to know about critical race theory, you need to understand the common themes of critical race theory, because the common themes that are characteristic of work in critical race theory are documented by such scholars as, or we say scholars, as Richard Delgado and Jean Stefancic, and they include critique of liberalism. Okay, critical race theory scholars question foundational liberal concepts such as enlightenment, rationalism, legal equality, and constitutional neutrality, and challenge the incrementalist approach of traditional civil rights discourse. They favor a race conscious approach to social transformation, critiquing liberal areas such as affirmative action, color blindness, role modeling, and of the merit principle, which with this type of approach, it relies more on political organizing in contrast to liberalism's reliance on rights-based remedies. Then, of course, there's storytelling, counter-storytelling, and naming one's own reality. Now, that's a narrative or storytelling used to illuminate, and explore lived experiences of racial oppression. Now, if you are a Gen Z or Gen Alpha or some Gen X, maybe some Gen X, and I know some baby boomers may have seen it, but for the most part, children today have never seen racism. They may have seen prejudice, but not racism. Now, Brian Brayboy has emphasized the epistemic importance of storytelling in indigenous American communities as superseding that of theory, and has proposed a tribal critical race theory. Now, again, one thing that you got to understand about a lot of this information, it leads right into what I call revisionist history. Now, revisionist interpretations of American civil rights law in progress, because criticism of civil rights scholarship and anti-discrimination laws such as Brown Board of Education or Brown versus Board of Education, you see that Derek Bell, one of CRT's founders, argues that civil rights advances for Black people coincided with the self-interest of white elitists. Now, that sounds like it is true because, what I could say with some white elitists, they wanted, in my humble opinion, and what I'm getting from this is they wanted integration so Black people wouldn't have their own economy and Black people would be comfortable in joining white people to put money into their interests and businesses. Now, likewise, Mary L. Dudziak performed extensive archival research in the U.S. Department of State and Department of Justice and concluded that the U.S. government support for civil rights legislation was motivated in part by the concern that racial discrimination harmed the United States foreign relations. Again, I just mentioned it, intersectional theory. Now, the examination of race, sex, and class, natural origin, and sexual orientation, and how their combination or their intersections plays out in various settings, and how the needs of a Latina female are different from those of a Black male, and whose needs are the ones promoted. Now we have standpoint epistemology. Now, that's the view that a member of a minority has an authority and ability to speak about racism that members of other racial groups do not have. And this can expose the racial neutrality of law as force. Again, somebody, maybe like a Caucasian person, can't speak on racial issues because they haven't seen racism or they haven't been exposed to racism. Now, they've been exposed to prejudice, but not racism. But when it comes to white people, they've been exposed to classism. Now, essentialism versus anti-essentialism, Delgado and Stefancic wrote, scholars who write about these issues are concerned with the appropriate unit for analysis. Like, is the Black community one or many communities? Do middle and working class African Americans have different interests and needs? Do all oppressed peoples have something in common? This is a look at the ways that oppressed groups may share in their oppression, but also have different needs and values that need to be looked at differently. It is a question of how groups can be essentialized or they're unable to be essentialized. Then we have structural determinism or structural determinism. Now, for the most part, when we deal with that, it's the exploration of how the structure of legal thought or culture influences its content, whereby a particular mode of thought or widely shared practice determines significant social outcomes, usually occurring without conscious knowledge. As such, theorists posit that our system cannot redress certain types of wrongs. Then we have empathetic fallacy, believing that one can change a narrative by offering an alternative in hopes that the listener's empathy will quickly and reliability take over. Empathy is not enough to change racism, as most people are not exposed to many people different from themselves, and people mostly seek out information about their own culture and group. Then you have what we call non-white cultural nationalism, separatism. That is the exploration of more radical views that argue for separation and reparations as a form of foreign aid, including Black nationalism. Now, you have internalization. Now, Karen Pike documents the theoretical element of internalized racism or internalized racial oppression, whereby victims of racism begin to believe in an ideology that they are inferior to whites and white culture who are superior. The internalizing of racism is not due to any weakness, ignorance, inferiority, psychological effect, gullibility, or other shortcomings of the oppressed. Instead, it is how authority and power and all aspects of society contribute to feelings of inequality. Well, one thing I will tell you this is life isn't fair. And again, going back to white people, because I do not believe that white people are superior to me. I don't. Because all white people aren't the same. And if you don't believe me, look how many white people who are elitists involve white people who aren't elitists. They don't. If you are a poor white person, you're basically an outcast. With Black people, we don't look at it that way. We include everybody. In fact, in the Black culture, we basically celebrate baby showers for potential single mothers. We also celebrate brothers coming out of jail before we celebrate brothers building businesses and brothers getting educated. We don't celebrate a lot of positivity, but we celebrate magic. When you have households and you have Black women who are in politics, and I'm not saying all Black women, they tend to bring feelings of magic, nuts and berries. Everything is going to be okay. Well, everything is not going to be okay if you don't know what to do. Now, when it comes to racism, a lot of us believe that there's institutional racism. And this is basically a heavy concept because you're going to have different opinions, different arguments. I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist. It's like someone saying crime doesn't exist. You can slow down crime, but you can't slow down you're not going to slow down or get rid of crime. Just like racism. And at the end of the day, when we deal with race, it's a tough subject to talk about. But as an individual, you have to understand the system. And many African Americans don't understand the system. They don't read. They don't understand economics. Now, Kamara Phyllis Jones defines institutionalized racism as differential access to the goods, services, and opportunities of society by race. Institutionalized racism is a normative, sometimes legalized, and often manifest as inherited disadvantage. It is a structural, having been absorbed into our institutions of custom, practice, and law. So there need to be an identifiable offender. Indeed, institutionalized racism is often evident as inaction in the face of need, manifesting itself in both material conditions and in access to power. With regard to the former, examples include differential access to quality education, sound housing, gain employment, appropriate medical facilities, and a clean environment. Now, one must understand that, and I know I talked about this with Brother Big Nate, as a Black person, many of us don't have access to money. It's because many of us don't know how to invest. Black people have money. What Black people need is their own banks. Now, I lived in Richmond, Virginia from 1983 to 1985, and I saw Black banks. Now, here's another thing you should know. There are plenty of Black businesses out there. However, they're not noticed because when it comes to critical race theory, I'm just going to come with it. It's just another way to keep us divided. That's what it is. Any of these movements, feminism, Black liberation theology, the Black Panther movement, they started out as movements of good intention. But the big umbrella is they're all wrapped up in Marxism, totalitarianism. There's nothing about economic or financial freedom when it comes to everything being about race. And it's funny, as Black people, as a Black person, Black people did more for themselves during the era when there was real racism than they're doing now. To me, a number of them can get an education. A number of them can run for political office. A number of them can be part of the criminal justice system. They can be in media, but they're still complaining. And they're complaining because that's what they want to do. And they know that white liberals are going to support them. And white liberals, for the most part, they feel guilty. But one thing I don't see happening is how come we don't take this information to the Black neighborhoods? I know we beat up on Chicago every weekend, but I live here in the Midwest, and Chicago is the biggest city. There's a lot of Black on Black crime going on. We're also afraid to adjust to talk about the abortion issue. You see, what I learned about life is that it's not fair. But if individuals out here dislike the Caucasians, why are you buying from them? Why did you, in the past, go for integration? So that's a walking contradiction. Why are you going to their schools? Why doesn't every black person go to an HBCU? The bottom line is you have one party that continues to use racism as a political football to stay in power. And critical race theory is just what it is. It's a theory. And it basically lacks supporting evidence, and it relies on plausible belief that reality is socially constructed, and it rejects evidence in favor of storytelling. It rejects truth and merit as expressions of political dominance, and it rejects the rule of law. Because, in particular, suggests that the success of Jews and Asians within what critical race theorists argue is a structurally unfair system, which may lend itself to allegations of cheating, advantage taking, or other such claims. Now, it is funny because Asians are doing pretty good here. Now, if you go over to China, there are a lot of poor Asians. Go to Hong Kong, all those places. You have Nigerians who come over here and do well. I will tell you this, if you make wrong decisions in life, you're always going to have a problem, but you can still make it. And I always say this, we talk so highly about race, but we don't look at ourselves when it comes to African Americans. I mean, I look here on these YouTube streets and I see us as men. We talk about the women all day. I will say this about the women. Even if their rhetoric is false, they stick together. When it comes to men, we don't stick together. We're always threatening bodily harm. We don't know how to agree or disagree. And when it comes to the threat of violence, it's usually from those black men to whom we disagree with. They like to call you a coon. They like to threaten you with violence. They call you all kinds of names. They want to curse you out. So in essence, when it comes to a war, well, we're warring within ourselves as black men. Because I can tell you tonight, there are going to be many panels up about women, about men. Now, I don't take the women's content very seriously. That's why I don't watch it. Again, I want you folks to continue to like the video. If you want to send a Cash App, you can do that as well. $ LEJ 0102
90 seconds.
1965. But again, talking about this critical race theory, I saw Mark Lamont Hill have an argument, I believe her name was Liz, and he was backed into a corner when she asked him a question. You see, there's so many definitions going around about
60 seconds.
this critical race theory that nobody really knows. But I will tell you this, from the left, any type of movement that they have comes from Marxism. Look at Black Lives Matter. Does Black Lives Matter go into their own communities and deal with what's going on with our people? I mean, Black Lives Matter. Did he deal with a 1-year-old baby getting shot in a major city? Nobody wants to deal with this issue. But in the end, I always look at it this way.
10 seconds.
We in America need to do a little bit more reading, and we need to stop believing in the institutions of religion. We need to stop believing big tech. We need to stop believing in corporations. The biggest two items that take us in the wrong direction, I'm going to say this, is media and education. You see, one thing I do know about these so-called scholars, they're scholars in theory and theory only. They have not practiced their craft. I know Dr. Boyce Watkins talks about economics, but he only uses theory. Has he ever practiced economics? That's like somebody telling me that they understand structural engineering, but they never practiced it. They've never been out in the field to see what a real foundation looks like. They don't understand the concept of differential settling. Therefore, how are they going to tell me how a crack gets in the foundation? You have to be able to utilize hands-on. And to be educated, in my humble opinion, means to get the street knowledge. And you want to use the word intersectionality, I'm going to use it right now. And you combine it with academic knowledge. And then you look at what's around you in the real world. You see, I believe in application more than academics. And having a degree, like I said, it's a tool. Doesn't make you smarter than the next guy or gal. And you have to be careful because some of these degrees are fake degrees. They come from diploma mills like Alameda University. I know I did an experiment and I bought one of those degrees. And what it is you call a 800 number. They send you a pack of degrees for a certain amount of money. And these degrees weren't accredited. And there was a stint where individuals were trying to use these degrees. I always say this about education. School isn't made for everybody. If you can't go to school, learn a trade. We put down so many trades. And yes, I've gone from critical race theory back into education because in retrospect, why I did this is we are so tied up in race. I mean, in school, we have to take race courses. I know at Temple University, where I went, I had to take a race course, something that I can look at for free online. But in the end, it really didn't teach me anything. Because if you have an opinion and you're taking courses from a left-wing professor, get the grade and get out, because they're not going to want to have any discussion with you because you don't believe their point of view. And all these movements, LGBTQ, feminism, came from the civil rights movement. And you have a number of living civil rights activists who want to be relevant, like your Jesse Jacksons, your Al Sharptons. Now, I'm not saying that there's no racism. There are pockets of racism. Now, those guys did come from racism. Your Jesse Lee Petersons. You might disagree with everything Jesse Lee Peterson says. He might sound like a coon to some black people, but he does put some truth out there, whether you agree with it or not. There are even some elements on the left who do put out some truth. You just have to listen for the truth and not react emotionally. And that's what's gotten into black people. And then when you have a professor that says we can't think analytically, and when you have the president out there saying, if you don't know who to vote for, me or Trump, you're not black. That's some bullshit that we need to question. They're already telling us that we're stupid. We don't know how to use the internet. Well, if I didn't know how to use the internet, I wouldn't be up here broadcasting. But you have a number of individuals out here that believe in that rhetoric. And then why do we have celebrities trying to lead us in the black community? These celebrities, they don't own anything. They're getting paid by the people they hate. Who owns all the record labels out here? I mean, I know Rockefeller Records is owned by Jay-Z. And I know Barry Gordy owned his own record label. But if you think about it, having power is having ownership. And I know Minister Japp mentioned it a while back. Many of us older brothers and older sisters were comfortable getting jobs. We weren't taught how to have businesses. And many of us older folks need to take cues of some of the younger folks who have sense, who want to build businesses. You know, if you're going to have power, you have to have economics. We need to come to a consensus that I don't care how much we talk about race, it's not helping us economically. At the end of the day, we still have hoods. We still have black on black crime. I'm not talking about white on white crime. I'm talking about black on black crime. We still can't get along with each other as black people. That's what we need to discuss. Many of us black men here on YouTube have egos. We think our content is authentic, when basically we're just expressing our experiences. You have some YouTubers here think, okay, all we do is quote stats. We quote probability. Listen, I question stats. Who took the stats? I mean, where did the Pew Research Center get their stats? You have to question that. Where does NBC get their stats? How big is the sample? Stats really are a guide. Because if you think about it, history changes statistics. Populations grow, some decline. I mean, I did a paper in my anthropology class on America and, of course, Indonesia, about population growth. Because in Indonesia, you know, most of their country is Muslim, while most of this country is Christian. But even over there in Indonesia, You want to know who the most powerful people are? Chinese people. And they make up 3% of that country. Now, if you look at the people who are powerful here, it's the Jews. They own all the media. Your Rob Reiners. Barbara Streisand has a big mouthpiece. She's a singer. In fact, your feminist movement, Betty Friedan. She started the National Organization for Women. You see, when you read, you find out these things. But again, many of us don't read because we're lazy. This is why we go to the media. In fact, I can tell you this. When it comes to some hypocrisy, and I've seen the video, it's this white man in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Now that guy, people are going to go off of that video to tell you about racism, that one incident. That's just an ignorant white guy. He thought he could taunt this African guy. And what happened the next day? Black Lives Matter showed up in that white neighborhood. But Black Lives Matter won't show up in Inglewood in Chicago. They won't show up in Cherry Hill in Baltimore. They won't show up Minnesota Avenue, Benning Road, Southeast DC. They won't show up in Compton. They won't show up in Churchill and Richmond, Virginia. Oh, no. They won't show up in the 9th Ward in New Orleans. That's why I tell you, the hypocrisy is real. And some of it is hidden under the umbrella of racism. And you brothers and sisters out there, you can't be stupid. When you are voting for a party that thinks you're stupid, you need to look at yourselves. Now, I'm not saying the Republicans are great. They got their problems too. But the left controls the narrative. The left believes that their way of thinking is going to help all of us. It is not. And I'm just going to say this. When it comes to race, you're never going to stop ignorance. What you can do is deal with people that you can discuss race with. I know it's a hard concept to discuss, even amongst other Black people. Because you have some that want race to stay. Why? Because it's all they got. And I'm just giving you the common sense version. And see, when I do my content here, I'm giving it to you where a 5th grader could understand it. I'm about common sense. This is why you don't see me doing a bunch of beefing. You don't see me calling people a bunch of names. I'm not going to do that. Because you can be on the left side of the spectrum politically, and you could say something that actually makes sense if you put it together correctly instead of being emotional. I'm saying, well, I never thought of that. And see, when it comes to men in general, many of us have to understand the concept of accountability. Many of us don't want to be accountable. I mean, if you're a man right now, and I'm freestyling right now, and you believe you can live inside a woman's house and call yourself a king, you're fooling yourself. You're not a king, you're weak. And on some channels, you got some women saying, well, we're not going to go back to the 1950s. It's kind of funny. A number of you want to go back to the 1950s when it comes to dating and the man paying for everything. Again, that's hypocrisy. Again, when it comes to the content of some of these African-American women, I don't even take it seriously. And I don't know why you brothers take it seriously. I'm not going to sit on 12, 24, or 30-hour live streams just talking to be talking. I'm going to do 1 hour, 2 hours, or maybe 3 hours. I think 3 hours is too long, but I'll do an hour, let you know where I'm coming from. And I'm always going to cam up. Now, again, I'm not here for you to agree with me. I'm giving you a perspective. The information is out there. You have to want to read it for yourself. And going back to men, many of us don't understand the concept of logic. Many of us are emotional. You have many black men who believe in women. I mean, look at what's going on. A number of African-American women believe in the LGBTQ theory. Now, I'm not slamming everybody in the LGBTQ community. It's just the militant ones, because the militant ones are coming after your kids so they can recruit them into their lifestyle. Be what you want. Preference is for an individual, but don't try to put your views down my throat. And then if I don't agree with them, call me wrong or call me a coon, because that won't fly. And then when we have a discussion about it, you're going to run away. That's called a coward. And I do see a lot of individuals on the left. They'll sit, they'll cackle all day, and they have nothing to say. They don't live in the real world. I mean, I look at Kevin Samuels' videos. He brings women on his show. And many of them, they live in a fantasy world. They'll come on the show. Some of them will try to get loud. But in essence, when he holds them accountable, they get triggered. And that's why when it comes to African-American women, not all of them, but a number and a percentage of them, it's easy to trigger them because many of them don't feel good about themselves. See, I'm not looking at the weave and the wigs, the weight. I'm not looking at that right now. I'm looking at the mindset. Because if you look at a lot of women in general here in this country, they don't understand how good they have it, but they dislike men. And I'm going to say this to a number of you women out there. If you don't like men, don't deal with men. Get yourself a BOB, a battery operated boyfriend, or get a woman, or get a dog, a cat. And you brothers out there, if you don't like women, don't deal with them. Get yourself some porn. Deal with a man. Deal with a tranny. Because in the end, here on YouTube, see, I know the brothers who are authentic, like Red Supreme out there, like Minister Jack, Brother Nate, Brother Trey, Brother Theo, Brother Sue, Asuma Abdu, those guys I deal with on their panels, Bernard Riley. They're authentic because I guarantee they're the same way in person as they are on social media. And see, social media has brought a lot of people down as well. Social media has actually produced a lot of fantasy. These women get up there and use their bodies to make money. They get a lot of men's money. Now, I say salute to those women, because if you men are dumb enough to pay for a woman that you'll never get, well, that's not the woman's fault. That's your fault. And see, going back to Black people, you see, people like me and Little Big Nate, we're not afraid to call out other Black men, but you don't see the sisterhood doing that. And that's a problem. If you don't agree with them, they want to argue with you all day long. No, you don't argue with them. You don't listen to them. And if they want to swirl, let them go swirl. I don't care who they date. If you think the other race is better, then stop talking about Black men on YouTube. And your brothers. Think the other race is better? Keep it to yourself. Because in the end, you're really hurting yourself. You're not hurting me. You're not hurting any of these other brothers out here. And I always believe this. Social media is a way you can express yourself. But again, from my humble opinion, if you really believe in what you're saying, you should cam up. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like I said, you can disagree with me all day. I'm not going to be hurt by it. You can call me all the names, but the people who are doing the name calling, they don't have anything going for themselves. And when it comes to a number of Black men out here, they're basically angry. They're angry at their moms. They're angry at the world. And when it comes to a number of African-American women, this is why they use social media. If you take social media away, we got to go back to the old way of doing things. You had to put in that work. But again, when it comes to race, you have to look at all the institutions. Now, are some of these Black people who are working for MSNBC or CNN, are they tokens? Start asking those questions. And something that nobody wants to speak about, and I'm going to speak about it right now. What about that Black pastor? No, David Carroll talks about it. Talking about being disrespectful to African-American women. There's nobody more disrespectful than that Black pastor. That Black pastor is there to take their money, and they will give that Black pastor their money. I mean, I look at the clips that Minister Japp has on his channel, and a couple of them, he has a pastor, I don't know his name, he's from Columbus, Ohio. You have a couple of Black women who walk in there on canes and something's happened to their leg. Once he touches them, they feel a lot better. A sister of mine told me, sweet chocolate of mine told me that it's a cortisone shot. I think she's right about that, because there's no way that you're going to be able to walk when you got a knee that's bothering you. You're going to have that cane, because if those women could really do something with those injured knees, they could get out there and jog. And then Minister Jap has people up there like Geno Jennings. It's funny when Geno Jennings starts calling the women prostitutes, you hear the men clapping. You don't hear the women saying anything because he's telling the truth. And there's another video that he has where he's trying to get the demons out of a woman because she's been having oral sex. You see, these are pastors out here that are disrespecting black women. Black pastors at that. They tell the sisters what they want to hear. And the sisters give them all their money. And in the end, they come out with an empty pocket. And see, what I can say about religion, religion has been there to control the masses of people. It has. Religion gives everybody that positive outlook. There's nothing wrong with having faith. But when you have no power, you're never going to have any say in what goes on in this society. That's a fact. Again, when it comes to the 5 power conferences of society that I mentioned, many of us as Black people, we don't understand them. Now, again, I want you all to like this video. And when it comes to critical race theory, I'm just going to say this. Scholars came up with it. Scholars, number of Black scholars came up with it. They want to use race as an excuse. You see, one thing I can tell you about these scholars, they've never had real jobs. They've always been in academia. Academia is a dangerous place today. It's more of a indoctrination fest. It's more of legalized extortion because the amount of people getting degrees from this type of education, from these educational institutions, they still don't know how to read, write, and communicate. They come out to be SJWs, social justice warriors, and they don't understand anything about responsibility and what they're doing. They get that degree and they go right back home and live with their parents, and their parents allow it. And see, when you have a disrespect for men who actually build things, and you're a woman, you're too comfortable because you didn't build anything. And when it comes to equality, I believe in equal opportunity. I don't believe in equity. There's no such thing as equal outcomes. That'll never happen. If you're an administrative assistant, you're not going to get the same pay as a CEO because you have less responsibilities. But most of us, as people in America, let me just focus on Black people because they talk about going back to Africa. How can you talk about going back to Africa when you've never been to Africa? I mean, I've been to Africa. I've been to Morocco, Al Hasima. I was in the Navy, so I traveled to the Mediterranean a couple of times. Been to Egypt. Africa is a continent made up of different countries. But many of you are talking about going back to the motherland. You've never been to the motherland. You would not know what it's like. And I guarantee if you go over there to the motherland and you catch something like malaria, you're going to have your ass right back here. If you go over to those other countries where the government is more or less tyrannical, you're going to come right back here. You know, kills me when a number of you all say you don't like this country, but yet you won't leave this country. I mean, I heard Whoopi Goldberg say if Donald Trump won the presidency, she was going to leave this country. Well, the funny thing about it is 4 years later, she's still on The View. And this is what's funny about individuals out here who are in a celebrity status. And then you have some young kids out here, because I saw a statistic where 36% of adults between 18 and 25 have no regard for this country. It's because they haven't done anything. And in my humble opinion, you look at Israel, and I've been over to Israel twice, been to Haifa, Israel. Individuals over there have to serve at least 4 years in some type of military service. Maybe they should have that here. Now, I'm not saying everything about this country is great, but it's not doom and gloom either. And the funny thing about it, being African-American, okay, may not make as much as the white man, but I'm not going to complain because I don't feel insecure, or I don't feel like I'm inferior to that white man. Because if you go back and find out all the products that Black men invented, like open heart surgery, refrigerated trucks for blood during World War II, the traffic signal. You had Madam C.J. Walker. She's got a center right here in Indiana, right on West Street, Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. You got a number of Blacks who have done something, but these Blacks aren't really looked at. Why? Because it doesn't fit the narrative of the complainers out there. And, looking at this critical race theory, not saying that racism doesn't exist, but it doesn't exist in the context that they're talking about it, where when I step outside, there's a fountain that says Blacks only, whites only. That was real racism. Okay, if you don't like me because I'm Black, go your way. Heck, I don't like other Blacks, and I'm sure other Blacks don't like me. But one thing that I'm not going to do, and brothers, you need to take heed of this, stop arguing on panels with other Blacks. You have a number of them who are extremely angry. You have a guy out there named True Freeman who's been stalking Tommy. Something's wrong with that guy. But as a content creator, who's supporting that guy? Now, as per Red Supreme, we all know who True Freeman is. I mean, you have that here on Black YouTube. And for the most part, what I see on Black YouTube, with the exception of a few channels that I watch, and I'm looking at the male sector, you have a number of guys who hate women, or you have a number of guys that want to fuck these women. That's the bottom line. But in the end, they really are up here to make themselves feel good because they don't have anything going on in real life. You can be successful on social media if you cater to the right audience. But for the most part, these guys, and even some of these women out here in the Black sector, they spend, seems like, a whole day going after each other. It's entertaining. And that's all it is. It's entertaining. It's nothing that I'm going to look at as serious. And the funny thing about it is you have adults who are 40, 50 years old still acting like children. Now, going back to everything I said, I know that we have all gone through some horrible experiences. We've gone through some decision making that wasn't popular. I understand that. But in the real world, you reap what you sow. And, when it comes to the concept of being red pill, again, it's going much further than just women. You have to understand what's going on in the real world out here. This is what I'm trying to tell you, folks. Getting a college degree, working on critical race theory, getting religious is not the real world. There's nothing wrong with having faith. You got a lot of people who hide under that religion of Christianity as well. In fact, a number of these Christians are the most hypocritical out here. But they use that as an escape route. And I also believe that a number of individuals here on YouTube use it as an escape route as well. Now, again, I don't have any problems with individuals having panels. Now, me, I'm still good old fashioned. I'm doing blog talk radio. I'm doing YouTube. And of course, this video is going to be over an hour. If you cannot watch an hour of my content, that's all on you. Because I'm not going to spend an hour up here just talking about nothing. Now, it's very easy to go from one subject to another, and I have done that. But what I want you all to know is this. If you're going to be somebody here in the manosphere, my suggestion is you should cam up. And when you cam up, be serious about it. And you don't have to have all of this equipment. It's nice, but give me an indication that you have read something. If you're going to quote statistics, question the statistics, but give me an indication that you believe in what you're saying. It's not whether somebody else agrees with it. And this is another thing that we have to learn as Black men. Again, how to disagree. And don't get upset and want to cause violence because somebody says something that triggers you. We got to get rid of the emotionalism. Because again, many African-American men are emotional because of being raised by their moms. And I want to say this before I conclude. Men are important if they're men. And to all the men out there, be proud to be a man. But understand what a man is. Understand that if you want to be a leader, I'm not going to use the word king, but a leader, you have to do jobs you don't want to do. If you have a woman and she asks something of you, you got to get your hands dirty. You got to have a know-how in being logical. Certainly, you're going to be disappointed. But if you want to build a healthy life, you need to understand politics. You need to understand economics. And you need to avoid individuals who aren't worthy of your time. In other words, don't argue with people that are going to waste your time. Get with individuals who are like-minded. Now, you're not going to always agree on everything, but learn from one another. And that's education as well. And learning from one another is free. Again, you have people who don't have college degrees who are doing better than people with college degrees. Let me give you an example. If I took a person making $100,000 and they're working as a superintendent in construction, and I took a person who's making $100,000 in their corporate job, what's the difference? $100,000 a year is $100,000 a year. Now, I don't use the term high value man. I don't use any of those terms. But what I will say is, are you a man of character, a man of righteousness? That's what I'm going to say. Because in the long run, when it comes to your success as a man, you must be accountable, you must have some integrity, and you must have character. You must understand that you're not going to be right all the time, and you must understand that people aren't going to agree with you all the time. But as a man, you are a builder and a problem solver. And like I said, here in YouTube, as I told little Big Nate, again, shout out to him, it's not necessarily the women that we're going against. We're going against other men like Paco out there who side with women. That's where the real problem is. Don't let a feminist male talk down to you because you want to be a man of masculinity. Because in the long run, societies don't function without masculine men. And that's my commentary for this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show, right here on YouTube and Blog Talk Radio. If you like what I just presented, please comment, share, and subscribe. Please like the videos. If you didn't like the content, thumb it down. You can also donate through the Cash App, which the Cash App is at the bottom of all of my videos. Just click on that link. Now, if you're looking for some STEM information, you check out the Mind of STEM channel. And on that channel, I give you a daily dose of science, technology, engineering, and of course, math. Here, I have a guest call-in number. Nobody called in. It's 215-383-5785. And that's all right, because I still got through this commentary with slight problems. I coughed a little bit, but that generally happens. But in the long run, I'm going to leave you with this. Oh, before I go on to my saying here, if you cannot find me on YouTube or Blog Talk Radio, you can simply check me out on Twitter, MeWe, and Parler. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to leave you with this. Be blessed for what you have. Don't worry about what you don't have. Always know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And you need to hear this. If it doesn't apply, let it fly. But if the shoe fits, you wear it. And if you don't like the shoe, you simply change it. Once again, thank you for listening to this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube and Blog Talk Radio. And I'm going to get into some more information on my next broadcast on economics, psychology, and of course, education. Stay tuned for that. And once again, thank you for listening to this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show right here on YouTube and Blog Talk Radio. Till next time, my name is Leon Jones. Want you to have a wonderful and gracious day. God bless you. I'm out.